All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully, some of you are getting very familiar with Jennifer and myself. So, I am Sandy Kaiser. I am the Employment First Specialist for the Division of DD, and then I'm also a benefits specialist. And I'll let Jennifer introduce herself real quick here.
My name is Jennifer Seidel. I'm a benefits specialist with ETOS, and we're
Uh-oh, we lost sound. Jennifer, I think your sound just cut out on us. There we go. All right. Well, hopefully we do not continue to have those glitches. So today we want to talk about taking a closer look at SSDI. So we started this discussion topic about 2 months ago. We started with an overview. Last month we talked about SSI. So today we're going to be talking about SSDI. So real quick, just to gauge who's all in the audience, we want to know what your role is. Are you a support coordinator, service provider? Maybe you're a regional office employee, or maybe you work for another state agency. Maybe you're an individual or a family member or some other kind of role. So, Kat, bring up that chat. You guys got about a minute to let us know what your role is. All right, our time has exhausted, and now the results are I would probably say somewhere from a third to a half are support coordinators. We've got a few service providers out there, a few individual and family members. So that's kind of our makeup here. All right, so moving on. Again, today's topic, we want to take a closer look at how income impacts those SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance like benefits, and what the work incentives available. So we're going to give you a recap of those Social Security Disability Insurance basics. Then we're going to jump in there and help you to see how the work incentives. Now, some of these work incentives occur somewhat automatically. We often refer to them as phases. And then there are some other work incentives where it might take a little bit more connection with Social Security and making sure that they are aware that some of these are in play. So, and then at the end, we're going to wrap up giving you some resources for where you can learn more. So, some basic terms for today. You're going to see SSA, which is Social Security Administration, SSDI, standing for Social Security Disability Insurance, CDB, which stands for Childhood Disability Benefit. It's also known as a Disabled Adult Child Benefit. So sometimes you might see DAC instead of CDB. Then there's DWB, which stands for Disabled Widowers Benefit. Of course, SGA, you're going to see a lot of. It stands for Substantial Gainful Activity. Trial Work Period is TWP. EPE is the Extended Period of Eligibility. Of course, you've probably already seen IRWE a lot, and that stands for Impairment-Related Work Expenses. And then EXR, Expedited Reinstatement of Benefits. So we just wanted to kind of present you with this so you weren't getting confused with little shortcuts. So, when talking about SSDI today, what type of benefits are we talking about? We're talking about the Title II benefits. So, that includes Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, which is based on a person's own work history. So, they have some work, they've paid into Social Security, and they've become eligible to draw upon their own work history or what they've paid into Social Security benefits. Childhood disability as well as disabled adult child benefit, that is based on a parent's work history. And then disabled widower's benefit is based on a spouse's work history. We haven't seen a lot of individuals with that disabled widower's benefits, but I was telling Jennifer, I think we are going to start seeing more of this a little bit later on. We see more and more individuals talking about marriage and wanting to have that type of intimacy with a loved one. So as more and more individuals with disabilities are getting married, we're probably going to see some of this disabled widowers benefits come into play a little bit later on in life. All right, I'm going to let Jennifer give us a review of Social Security disability. So Jennifer?
All right, so for those of you who may have started out with us in this training several months ago, we covered this exact information then, but we want to go over it again just to keep fresh what exactly we're talking about this session. And so SSDI is cash benefits based on someone's Social Security work record. And so in order to get it, the person has to be determined that they have a disability according to Social Security's definition, and they have to have paid enough taxes into the Social Security disability system to reach insured status. So that will either be through their own work record or, like Sandy was talking about, perhaps through a parent's work record or a spouse's work record. Everybody's Social Security disability benefit amount is going to be different because it's based on the amount of taxes that they've paid over the period of time that they've worked. So the average SSDI benefit for 2022 is $1,358, but clearly that's going to vary from person to person. And someone receiving SSDI would typically get their benefit check on the 3rd of the month. And that's just kind of a reminder for us or a little pointer for us to kind of help determine maybe what kind of benefit someone is receiving in case they don't know. When we think about SSDI benefits, we often think about the health insurance benefits that come along with it. And for Title II benefits, that is Medicare. So Medicare comes into play after a 24-month waiting period. One of the other things that is unique about SSDI is that there is no asset limit. So Social Security is not concerned about how much money someone has in their savings account or in a retirement account. So having money in resources is not something that makes someone not receive their benefit amount. So that's helpful to know. So now let's look at what happens to someone's SSDI benefit if they go to work. And one of the things about SSDI that makes it a little bit easier for people to grasp or understand is that when Social Security is looking at earnings and determining whether or not someone's going to get their benefit amount, it's not something that fluctuates in the amount they receive. They're going to receive the same amount consistently, either the entire amount or zero. So there's no in between, no up and down like you would get with SSI benefits. So if a person is earning below SGA, which is that substantial gainful activity, then that person would receive all of their earnings from their job plus their SSDI benefit check. If the person increases their earnings and their earnings go up above SGA, then that's when Social Security can look at that and make a determination as to whether or not they're going to be able to keep their benefit amount for that particular month. And so if earnings are above SGA, then that's when it's very possible that the person may get zero benefit for that particular month. And an example of that real quick would be someone whose earnings are $720 a month and getting an SSDI benefit of $925 a month. So clearly we know that substantial gainful activity is $1,350 and 720 is less than that. So in this particular case, since their earnings are below SGA, they would get both their earnings and their Social Security disability insurance benefit. The second fact we want to look at is what we like to say, keep, or restart. And this is when there are some incentives built in, some kind of safeguards. One is that you can keep your Medicare and possibly even your Medicaid, even if you stop receiving SSDI benefits. And also you can keep your SSDI cash benefits when earning above SGA in some situations. And we are going to cover those as we go through this training. And then finally, one of the things that's also another safeguard that's built in there is that if something happens to someone's income and it decreases and goes below SGA again, there's a special situation where they can be able to restart their benefits quickly. So the myths we want to look out for is I'll lose my SSDI or I'll have less money if I work. And we're going to look at that. We're going to talk about when that may happen and when that won't happen. And then finally, I'll lose my Medicare if I work. So that's another myth we want to kind of bust and make sure that you understand how Medicare, what does happen to your Medicare if you are working. Okay, the other thing to think about when you're looking at SSDI is the effects of income on it. And I talked about this already a little bit on the previous slide, but remember for SSDI, they only consider earned income. So that's money that someone is earning from their employment. Unearned income doesn't impact benefits and assets don't impact benefits. And the other important thing we already talked about, it's either all or nothing when it comes to someone's benefit check. They're either going to get the full amount or they're going to get zero, and that's based on whether or not Social Security feels like they are working at SGA or not. And so above SGA, it comes into question whether they'll get their benefit check. If they're below SGA, then their benefit would most likely continue. All right, and earned income versus unearned income. This is, I think, pretty self-explanatory, but your earned income, we're looking at things from your job, basically. That could be employment at a company, or it could be net earnings from self-employment. It could also be certain royalties. Also, sheltered workshop payments do count as earned income. Sometimes people think they don't, but they do. And then things that Social Security does not look at or is not concerned about when it comes to your Social Security disability benefits is that unearned income, such as other retirement payments. Someone may get benefits from like veterans or different things like that. Unemployment benefits don't count. Interest income, dividends, cash from friends and family. Social Security does not take those things into consideration when looking at SGA. And one of the other things I might just mention real quick is even like if someone gets benefits, like maybe they're taking vacation time or sick time, because the person's not actually working, that's not considered either. So sometimes that has to be pointed out to Social Security, but that's another Really, they're only looking at the earnings someone gets from actually working.
All right, so you're going to see this slide multiple times today. And basically, we just wanted to provide you with a graphic representation so you can see how um, individuals move from one phase to the next and what work incentives will be available under those phases. So again, today, we're not expecting you guys to really have a thorough knowledge of all the decisions and things that come into play. That's more something where you're going to be referring somebody onto benefits planning service to get that detailed explanation of the different work incentives and what decisions people might need to be making and how they can best utilize those work incentives. Our goal today is just to give you that overview, to give you that familiarity, so that little basic understanding of uh, people being able to keep their benefits, easily get them back, that kind of thing. So again, I put in the chat that often I hear from individuals, their two biggest fears are losing those medical coverage, and then what happens if it doesn't work out? What happens if I get a job, I lose my Social Security benefits? Am I stuck only being able to do a brand new application and having to wait 3 to 5 years to get my benefits started back again? So again, today we want to kind of help give you guys some comfort in reassuring people that it's okay. They can try out working, they can try and be more self-sufficient, and they don't have to worry about that rug being pulled out from underneath them. So right now, what we want to focus on is we want to focus on that first phase, that trial work period. The takeaway here during the trial work period is that individuals can really try out working. They can earn as much as they want, and they're still going to be getting their Social Security benefit during that time period. So it's your first phase in returning back to work. Again, during this phase, beneficiaries are going to continue to receive all of their cash benefit, regardless of how much they are earning from work. And as Jennifer pointed out, when it comes to Social Security determining if you're engaging in substantial gainful activity, they're only looking at earnings from work. So during this phase, no other work incentives are going to apply because, again, an individual can earn more than that substantial gainful activity and still get all of their Social Security benefit. So no other work incentives will apply. Usually we hear trial work period as being 9 months, but those 9 months don't have to occur consecutively. They can be spaced out over time. But once all of those 9 months fall within a 5-year period, somebody's going to be considered out of their trial work period. It's going to have been exhausted. So trial work month is defined as any month the beneficiary earns at least the trial work amount. You'll notice these amounts are different than the substantial gainful activity. So basically, again, all Social Security is using that trial work amount for is to count those trial work months. That's all it's being used for. So here's an example. Braytac recently obtained a full-time job where he's earning $18 an hour. He started this job on June 1st. This is his first job since becoming entitled to SSDI. So we know he has not used any trial work months up until now because this is his first job since becoming entitled to that SSDI. So making $18 an hour and working 40 hours a week, we expect that he's going to earn over $3,000 a month. So that is definitely going to exceed the trial work month or trial work amount of $970 per month. So what we're expecting, BreakTech's going to go through his trial work period very quickly. It is going to be a consecutive 9 months. provided that he's earning at least $970 each month. So here's the benefit. So you see that his work income's over $3,000 a month, but he's going to keep getting his SSDI during that time that he's earning that much through at least February of 2023. So you'll notice kind of from June 1st to February 2023, that's the 9 months. So during that 9-month trial work period, he's going to keep getting his cash benefit while also getting that work income. Jennifer, you want to talk about the second phase, the extended period of eligibility?
Yes. All right. So for the second phase, it starts right after the trial work period ends. So some people may never actually get to phase 2 because if they never finish their 9 trial work period months, then they stay in phase 1. But as soon as those 9 months are over, then the extended period of eligibility begins. And this phase is the same length of time for everybody, and that's 3 years or 36 months. And it's during this time period that we can start to look at work incentives, and we will get into that more as we move through the slides. All right, so again, what we have here is an example of someone who has entered his extended period of eligibility. So let's look at Selmac. He has been working a part-time job for a little while now, and he's been working long enough that back in February of 2019, he earned enough work credits to be able to qualify for SSDI based on his own work record. At that time, he was working 30 hours a week, making $8.60 an hour. And so that was over the trial work period amount. And he used his 9 months up. So in October of 2019, when he finished that up, he then starts the next month, in November 2019, into his extended period of eligibility. And that window is where his 36-month time frame starts. And at the time of November 2019, SGA is $1,220 a month. So again, remember those numbers, those SGA numbers. Social Security comes out with a new number every year. So it's important to kind of keep up with what that number is each year so that you're making proper, looking at it properly. But back in 2019, when he first started his extended period of eligibility, he was still working 30 hours a week, earning $8.60 an hour. We multiply that by 4.35, and we see that he comes up with earnings of $1,122 and some change. That's below SGA of $1,220. So that means each month, as long as his earnings are below $1,220, there shouldn't be any real question about whether or not he's going to keep his Social Security disability income. His monthly check will come just like every month. He should get it. Then in 2020, he got another raise. So minimum wage went up. He's still working 30 hours a week, but his wages went up to $9.45 an hour. We do the math on that. We find out he's making $1,233 a month, and SGA for 2020 was $1,260. So he's under SGA just barely, but he is under. So unless something were to happen during this time period, like say he picked up an extra shift, maybe he worked extra, some overtime or 40 hours and covered someone's vacation time. If something like that happens and he goes over SGA for that month, then it's possible for that particular month that he would not get his benefit check. That's kind of the good thing about the extended period of eligibility. Every month is looked at and reviewed, and so there's no real fear, like if something happens and you work over, that you've lost everything, because it continues for that entire 3-year period where they're reviewing it month by month. Now in 2021, he gets another raise, and he's up to now $10.30 an hour. And SGA is $1,310 in 2021, and his wages, his earnings, are $1,344.15. So he is just barely over SGA. Now, what Social Security says then at that point is, okay, it's all out on the table now. We need to really look at CellMax earnings and make a decision as to whether or not we think he's working at SGA level or not. They're not just looking at a number, so it's not just an automatic, okay, he's working at SGA. They're looking at other things too. But the point is, in this particular instance, if he's not using any other work incentives, then it's more than likely that he would not receive his SSDI benefit amount for each month that he is working over SGA. Then in 2022, he gets another raise, $11.15 an hour. SGA for that year is $1,350. His earnings are over that by quite a bit more now, about $100 over. And again, if he's not using any work incentives, then he's not going to be getting his SSDI benefit. But the key to this one is that now towards the end of 2022, we're getting to the point where his extended period of eligibility is about to end, because remember, it started in November, of 2019. So that would mean the end of October of 2022 is really all of that's when his period goes through. And then November, he's going to start the next phase, which Sandy's going to cover.
All right, so now going back to our graphic, we are now about to go into phase 3, and you're going to notice there's a little gap here in between phase 2 and phase 3, and I'm going to explain that a little bit more. But basically, not everybody enters into that phase 3. So that phase 3, that third and final phase, is the expedited reinstatement of benefits. 2 things have to happen for somebody to be in this phase. One, they have to have already used up their trial work period and extended period of eligibility. So those 2 phases have to be done and over with. But then the second thing that has to have happened is that their cash SSDI benefit has to have stopped due to work income. So a lot of times what we see is individuals may have used up their trial work period and their extended period of eligibility, but because they're earning below that SGA, their cash benefit hasn't stopped. And so those individuals aren't in that third and final stage yet. It's only when that cash benefit stops and they're outside of those 2 phases that they will enter into that third and final phase. So that third and final phase is 5 years. So, and like the extended period of eligibility, it's consecutive. There is no stopping in between. So once they go into that phase, it's 60 months, period. So within that 60-month period of entering the phase, if the person's ability to engage in substantial gainful activity stops, if it changes, then that extended or expedited reinstatement of benefits process can be used to resume receiving that person's cash SSDI benefit. So some things to note here. So the reason for no longer being able to engage in that substantial gainful activity has to be for the same disabling condition that that person is receiving the benefit. Cannot be due to a new disabling condition. Also, the other thing is that inability to engage in that substantial gainful activity must be considered long term. It can't be something that is only temporary, a month or two. Here's the other really added benefit of the expedited reinstatement of benefits. Social Security has 6 months to make a decision, and during that 6-month period, that person can be getting their cash benefit while they're awaiting that decision from Social Security. So, um, when we often hear about individuals being afraid of, hey, what happens if I lose my job? I rely on that income to make ends meet. Being able to say, hey, Social Security, I need my cash benefit while you're making a decision, that's going to help ease some of that burden. All right, so here's an example. Vala has been working at the same job for 5 years now. So due to that, we know she's probably already exhausted her trial work period and her extended period of eligibility, but she's continued to receive her SSDI as her work income has remained below that substantial gainful activity amount. So this promotion would cause her work income to exceed that SGA amount. Now, Vala, she wants to give it a try to see if she could do it. Her team also is like, let's go for it. Let's try it out. So Vala was able to successfully transition into her new role. And at that point, her SSDI stopped. However, after about 1 year, Vala experienced major life changes. She had change in a parent's health, which then caused her to have to move out of her family's home and go into residential support. So not only is she kind of worried about her parent, who she's very connected with, but now she's having to adjust to living in another place, living with other people, getting supports from people outside of her family. And it really put her in a tailspin. She wasn't coping well with that major life change. So basically, uh, this was showing up at work. It was affecting with her performance and her ability to cope with her coworkers and others. So it unfortunately led to her being dismissed from her job. But because it was basically due to her disabling condition, um, the team was able to help her with the expedited reinstatement process and go back to Social Security and say, hey, I need my Social Security benefit back. I'm no longer able to engage in that substantial gainful activity. So she was able to find a new job that wasn't as demanding. And again, everybody agreed that it's like, okay, if she gets over that 20 to 25 hours per week, it's almost too demanding on her. It's too much for her to handle. So they kind of agreed, nope, this is going to be a long-term thing where we're going to kind of stand back a little bit, be a less demanding, uh, and let her, kind of recoup here. So again, through that expedited reinstatement process, she was able to get her SSDI back as she was no longer engaging in that substantial gainful activity. She also received it for the 6 months that Social Security took to make a decision about her eligibility for SSDI. And Jen, you want to start us off talking about some of those work incentives that start to come in play during those second and third phases?
Absolutely. So the first one we're going to talk about is impairment-related work expenses, or IRWEs. Probably sounds familiar to you if you've been tuning in, because we talked about this one last month as well. So let's get into that a little bit more. An IRWE is an impairment-related work expense that is an out-of-pocket cost for an item or service that's needed for someone's work, but it has to be related to the person's disability. And it has to be needed for them for their job. So it's got to be due to their disability and needed for the job. So something that wouldn't count would be something that all employees would need or have to work. So it has to, again, be kind of specific to this particular person's situation. The key takeaway here is if you'll think back to like some of the examples we've used where someone's earnings were just barely over SGA, sometimes that, $50 a month, $100 a month, a lot of times there is something that that person has an expense that maybe you just are forgetting about, and it's important to kind of have a conversation about that. And then if there are expenses that they have, out-of-pocket expenses, to speak with someone at Social Security about that so that they can take those things into consideration when determining whether or not someone is working at SGA or not. So let's look at an example here. We have Lantash, who has been working since June of 2021, working 30 hours a week, making $12 an hour. This is definitely above SGA, but he continued to receive his SSDI cash benefits during his trial work period phase. So keeping the wages, keeping the benefits. Once his trial work period months are over and he's used those all up, now is when we can look at whether or not there are any IRWs that come into play. And for him, he has a handful of IRWs to be reviewed. One is some prescription medication that he takes. And so his copay, again, it's not the total cost of the medicine, it's his out-of-pocket expenses, is $6 a month. He really needs the medicine to be able to manage his anxiety. If he didn't have it, he wouldn't be able to do his job. So typically this is going to be considered an IRWI. And then he also has $400 a month he has to spend for transportation to and from work. Now, he's not able to drive because of his anxiety. So not all transportation expenses are considered IRWI. So this is, again, where you submit it to Social Security, they review it, and they make the decision. But what I always say, it doesn't hurt to submit it because you want to get an answer and you want that to be considered, because again, it can make a big difference in someone's bottom line of the money they have to pay their bills monthly. But in his particular case, they were able to subtract from his gross earnings both his transportation costs and his medication, and that then put him below SGA, and he was able to continue to receive both his earnings and his Social Security disability benefit.
All right, so now we're going to talk about subsidies and special conditions. And again, looking at this graphic, you're going to see these are two work incentives that don't come in play until we're outside of that trial work period. So they can start coming into play during that extended period of eligibility and beyond. So what are special conditions and subsidies? It's when an employer is paying a person more than the value of their work. So we know that employers, by law, by Department of Labor regulations, they can't discriminate between different people's pay in the same position. So if there's basically they're required to do the same work, they're in the same position, you're going to see a similar amount of pay among people in that type of position. So, however, Social Security realizes that sometimes individuals with disabilities may need extra assistance to earn that pay. So, who could be eligible for that one? Anyone that you're noticing that requiring extra assistance on the job or having accommodations that may result in a little bit of difference there between what is required of this employee with a disability compared to other employees without a disability. So it's really important, like Jennifer was talking about, when someone's earning at or above that substantial gainful activity amount, we really need to be looking out for anything that could be a special condition or a subsidy that could allow that person to continue receiving their cash benefit even though they're earning at or above that SGA amount. So here's an example of a subsidy. So Jill Lennar works 22 and a half hours per week. Recently, the company increased everyone's wages to $15 an hour, trying to be competitive with other businesses in the community. So this caused Jill Lennar's income to exceed that substantial gainful activity amount. So since she had already exhausted her trial work period, Social Security allowed other factors like those impairment related work expenses, special conditions, subsidies to determine whether or not Jill Lennar was really, truly working at or above that SGA amount. So often she performs most of her duties well, but there's one task that she struggles with. And in talking with her supervisor, it's found out that supervisor thinks about 90% of her job she's doing well. So she's getting paid the same wage as others in her position, but she's only performing 90% of her job. So therefore, Social Security is willing to take that into consideration and look at her earnings and could possibly even determine that they're going to only count 90% of her wages in determining whether or not she is engaging in that substantial gainful activity. So here's an example of a special condition. So Martouf currently works 30 hours per week, making about $12 an hour. Of course, this causes his earnings to exceed that substantial gainful activity. However, Martouf receives about 5 hours a week of job coaching. Basically, all Martouf is really needing is that job coach helps him get himself ready for the day. So kind of helps him to organize his work tasks and his supplies. And then once Martouf is off and working, he can go. He can take it himself. He's not needing any more hands-on assistance. So, however, that 5 hours that he needs for helping him organize his work tasks and his supplies, that hands-on assistance, Social Security says, he got help to earn that much money. So they're not going to count the time that a job coach is providing that hands-on assistance. So key here is that for Social Security to count that job coaching, it has to be hands-on assistance. So just supervision, just kind of watching or checking in to see how an employee is doing may not count. So I just want to make that distinction there. So, but in Martouf's example, his gross earnings were about 1,566, again, over the substantial gainful activity. But because we were able to subtract that 5 hours a week from his work income, we were able to subtract about $261 of earnings, which then brought his countable earnings down to $1,305, which is below the substantial gainful activity. So this means Martouf got to keep getting his SSDI benefit, even though his work wages were above that substantial gainful activity amount. All right, Jen, you want to talk about grace period here?
Yeah, so grace period is the last one we're going to talk about on this little chart, and it is the first month outside of the trial work period when the person earns at least SGA amount. And so that starts their grace period. That's that first month is when it starts. And then it is 2 months following that. So we have a 3-month period of time that's called the grace period. And during this time period, the person, even though they're working at or above SGA, and Social Security's made that determination, they will still receive their cash benefit during that 3-month period of time. And one of the things I always heard about this grace period, the reason why there is a grace period is when you think about Social Security, it kind of takes them a while to make a decision as to whether or not someone's working at SGA. Again, think about it like they're not just looking at those check stubs and making a yes, no decision. They're not just saying, okay, $1,400, he's working above SGA. they have to kind of look at it a little bit more closely than that. They have to look at those, see if there's any impairment related work expenses. Is there any subsidies? And so as they're looking at those things, it takes them some time. So that's why that grace period is kind of there as well, because it may be that they're making that decision and they haven't decided yet whether or not that person's working at SGA. So you've got kind of that little bit of a window to still be getting the benefit check. So let's look at this particular example. We've got Ishta, who is working 25 hours a week, making minimum wage in August of 2020. Her income for the year for that month was $1,027. This exceeds the trial work period amount but was less than SGA. Once she used up all of her trial work period months in June of 2021, then we had like an increase in pay again, up to $10.30 an hour, which bumped her income up to $1,120.13 a month. Again, this is below SGA, so she continues to receive her SSDI benefit. Finally, in 2022, the company gives everyone that raise to the $15 an hour, which puts her earnings above SGA. So that first month that she goes above SGA is going to be the start of her grace period. And that will be where that starts. And again, that will go for a total of 3 months. So she would get her benefit during that time. One of the other things we always like to talk about, and we kind of hinted at this at the beginning, about ways to keep medical coverage during this time period. So when someone's earning, their benefits are kind of coming into question, or maybe they're ending, or whatever the situation is, there are ways built into the system to be able to keep medical coverage, which is also really crucial for people. It's one of the most important things people want to know about. So when someone stops receiving their Title II or their SSDI cash benefit amount due to work income, they can continue to receive their Medicare for up to 93 more months. They don't have to pay for the Part A hospitalization coverage. That's still no charge, but they do have to pay for the Part B coverage. And most times you think about like the would automatically come out of someone's SSDI benefit check. So in this case, if they're not getting the benefit check, they would have to actually make that payment to Social Security to be able to keep it. After the 93-month period, the individual can opt to continue Medicare beyond that, but they have to pay for both Part A and Part B premiums. So that's important to know. And then we also want to talk a little bit about Medicaid. And again, we're not going to get into it right now, but there is a program, Ticket to Work Health Assurance, that allows for someone to keep their Medicaid if they're below a certain income level. And there's several things that kind of come into play to determine someone's eligibility for that if they're receiving a Title II benefit. And we are going to dive into that in an upcoming session.
All right. So wrapping us up now, you're going to see some links to some of the topics covered. So if you're wanting to learn more about trial work period, you can go to ssa.gov. There's a link there. We talked about the extended period of eligibility. There's a link to choosework.ssa.gov. Expedite reinstatement of benefits, impairment related work expenses, and then subsidies and special conditions. Those are all some of the topics we talked about today, and there's the links that you'll be able to use to take a closer look at some of these. And again, as Kat mentioned, this slideshow along with the recording will be posted on our website. So once it's available on our website, you should be able to come back, pull up this webinar and use these links to take a closer look at some of those topics we covered if you wanted to. So also, if you're wanting to learn more, so back in 2018, the division hosted a 5-part benefits planning service or series. It was held between July 10th and August 6th. So again, there's a link where you can go to access those recorded webinars and those materials. Also, Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU, they offer an introductory web course, which does a really great job of introducing you to some of these concepts and explaining them. When Jen was going over the SSDI basics, I so much was tempted to come off mute and say, SSDI, wage replacement. And that was something I picked up from that VCU's introductory web course. So that's how they would explain those SSDI benefits. And it helps you think. It's like, okay, it's a wage replacement. So only wages are going to affect it, nothing else. So, of course, mo.db101.org is another great resource for you as well as individuals that you might work with. One of the things that I love about that mo.db101 website is that there are videos, and the videos are very short in duration. They're about 5 minutes each, but they explain things in very easy to understand terms using everyday language. So a lot of the jargons is not getting used. So it makes it very easy to follow and understand. And you feel like, okay, now I get it. If you want to take a deeper dive, if you want to know a little bit more, go into the weeds, as Jennifer and I will talk about going deep into those weeds, you can click on the articles to learn more about certain topics. And then, of course, there is an estimator for individuals who are like, hey, I just got a raise. What's that going to do? You can go and answer those questions and figure it out. That estimator, I will say, takes about 30 minutes to get through all the way. All right. And of course, we have some tip sheets available on our website. Again, you can kind of look at these links later on, click on them. But there's an easy guide to managing employment and benefits tip sheet. There is a kind of like a Social Security side-by-side benefit tip sheet. And then there is information about changing the culture and message about benefits. So again, our hope here is that you guys are now going to feel a little bit more comfortable reassuring people that, yeah, you can go to work. It's not going to be that bad. And there are work incentives you can utilize that can either help you to keep getting your cash benefit, or if you're really earning too much, you can still get it back if you need it back. All right, so coming up next month, July 13th, we're going to talk about that Medicaid coverage. So we're going to talk about ticket to work health insurance, as well as probably talk a little bit more about that 1619B as well. So then in August, we're contemplating doing a session where it'd be more interactive, giving you scenarios and seeing if you can point out, ooh, this person would be a good candidate for this, time to get them to a benefit specialist. So this might be a way for you guys to test out your knowledge. So let us know in the surveys if you think that's a good idea. And then September 4th, we'll probably be on a new topic. So again, those surveys help us to determine what to do next. And like I said, I pointed out a little teaser there that we're contemplating doing a more interactive session where you guys can test out your knowledge. So in that survey, let us know what you think of that idea. We want to hear. And other than that, if you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. My phone number is 636-926-1229, and I can be reached via email at sandy.kaiser, and that's spelled Keyser, @dmh.mo.gov. And thank you for joining us this afternoon. Take care, everyone.